Galen stumbled into the neon-soaked streets of the Zyron trading district, clutching the last few credits he had left. His breath fogged the air in short, frustrated bursts. The alien marketplace was alive with the hum of countless species bartering, shouting, and laughing, a vibrant cacophony of opportunity. For everyone but him. "Out of my way, human," snarled a towering Krellian merchant, his spiked shoulders nearly knocking Galen off balance. Galen raised his hands in surrender. "Sorry. Just passing through." The merchant growled, then lumbered off, leaving Galen to his thoughts. How had it come to this? Months ago, he had left Earth full of hope, seeking fortune among the stars. He had a knack for mechanics and enough charm to talk his way into work, or so he thought. But alien economies were cruel, and humans weren't exactly welcomed with open arms in the Zyron consortium. Now he was broke, jobless, and out of options. His stomach growled, reminding him of his most pressing problem. He scanned the food stalls ahead, each displaying bizarre delicacies that shimmered under fluorescent lights. He approached one cautiously, a stand run by a gelatinous alien whose body shifted colors as it waved him closer. "Try the quaffle fruit," it gurgled in broken universal standard. "Good for digestion." Galen eyed the slimy, pulsating fruit and winced. "How much?" 5 credits. He patted his pocket and felt the pathetic jingle of 3 credits. With a resigned sigh, he shook his head and turned away. "Human," came a soft, lilting voice from behind him. It wasn't the harsh bark of the traders or the guttural growls of the Krellians. This voice was almost melodic. Galen turned and froze. Standing before him was a Zelaran female, her luminous silver skin catching the light like liquid moonlight. Her eyes were an otherworldly shade of violet, wide and curious. She wore a simple but elegant robe that hinted at status yet bore none of the pomp of royalty. "Yeah," Galen managed, trying not to stare too hard. Zelarans were known for their ethereal beauty, but this one seemed to shine a little brighter than the rest. "You seem desperate," she said, tilting her head. Her voice was calm, almost soothing, but there was a sharpness in her gaze, a calculating intelligence. Galen chuckled bitterly. "Is it that obvious?" "Very." Her lips curled into a faint smile. "I might have a solution for you." He raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." "I need a husband." Galen blinked. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," she said, crossing her arms. "A husband. And you need money. I believe we can help each other." The absurdity of her statement hit Galen like a freight train. "Lady, I think you've got the wrong guy. I'm broke, unemployed, and last I checked, Zelarans don't marry humans." "It's unconventional," she admitted, her expression unchanging. "But not impossible. My people value practicality. And you, human, are practical in ways they are not." Galen narrowed his eyes. "Why me?" She hesitated for a moment, as if weighing how much to reveal. "My name is Kayla. I come from one of the noble houses of Zelara, but my family's influence has waned. Without a husband, I cannot claim my inheritance, and without my inheritance, I cannot rebuild what was lost." "And where do I fit into this?" he asked, crossing his arms. Kayla took a step closer, her violet eyes locking onto his. "Your kind is known for resilience, resourcefulness, and unpredictability. Traits my people lack. You would make an acceptable partner in the eyes of the council." Galen rubbed the back of his neck. This was insane. But then again, so was his current situation. "What's in it for me?" "Money," Kayla said simply. "Enough to solve your current problems. And more." He frowned. "And what happens after? What's the catch?" Kayla's gaze softened, just a fraction. "We part ways. Once my inheritance is secured, I'll ensure you're compensated and free to leave." Galen considered her words. It sounded too good to be true, but the promise of financial stability was tempting. And honestly, what did he have to lose? "All right," he said, extending a hand. "You've got yourself a deal." Kayla stared at his hand for a moment, then clasped it in her own. Her skin was cool to the touch, smooth as polished metal. "Very well. But you must know, human, this will not be easy." "When is it ever?" Galen muttered. As they walked away together, Galen couldn't shake the feeling that he had just stepped into something far bigger than he could comprehend. But for now, he had a roof over his head, a full stomach on the horizon, and maybe, just maybe, a shot at turning his luck around. Little did he know, Kayla's plan was about to unravel secrets that would change both their lives forever. The transport vessel hummed softly as it cut through the vast expanse of space, its sleek design reflecting the faint glow of distant stars. Galen sat uncomfortably in the passenger seat, the sharp angles of the Zalaran craft a stark contrast to the utilitarian simplicity of human ships. Beside him, Kayla manipulated the holographic controls with an elegance that seemed effortless. "So," Galen began, breaking the silence, "where exactly are we going?" "To Xylaros Prime," Kayla replied without looking at him. Her tone was even, but there was a tension in her posture that hadn't been there before. "The Council will need to formally recognize our union." Galen raised an eyebrow. "And they're just going to believe we fell madly in love?" Kayla's fingers paused midair. "Of course not. Zalarans value logic and practicality above sentimentality. They'll accept our union if it serves a purpose. You'll need to convince them you are a suitable match." "And how exactly do I do that?" Galen asked, crossing his arms. She turned to face him, her violet eyes narrowing slightly. "You'll do what humans do best, improvise." He sighed. "Great plan. Glad we've got that sorted." Kayla ignored his sarcasm and returned her attention to the controls. The hum of the ship grew louder as they approached the shimmering blue orb of Xylaros Prime. The planet's surface was a patchwork of towering spires and sprawling urban centers, connected by ribbons of light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the planet itself. The ship descended smoothly onto a landing platform, where a delegation of Zalarans awaited. Kayla stepped out first, her posture regal and composed. Galen followed, feeling distinctly out of place in his worn-out jacket and scuffed boots. The delegation's eyes flicked to him with a mix of curiosity and disdain. Lady Kayla, an older Zalaran with a sharp jawline and silver robes, said, stepping forward. His voice was calm but carried an unmistakable air of authority. "You have returned sooner than expected." Kayla inclined her head. "Counselor Viren, I trust the preparations for the inheritance ceremony are proceeding." "They are," Viren replied, his gaze shifting to Galen. "And this is?" "My chosen partner," Kayla said smoothly. "Galen." Viren's eyes narrowed. "A human." Galen offered a strained smile. "Nice to meet you too." Kayla shot him a warning glance but said nothing. Viren studied Galen for a moment longer before turning back to Kayla. "This is highly unorthodox," he said. "The Council will require a convincing argument to approve such a pairing." "I expected as much," Kayla replied. "We will present our case tomorrow." Viren nodded reluctantly and gestured for them to follow. The delegation led them into a towering structure of crystalline glass and metal, its interior filled with a faint, ethereal glow. They were shown to a guest suite, where Kayla immediately began pacing. "This is going to be more difficult than I anticipated," she admitted. Galen leaned against the wall, watching her. "So what's the plan?" "We need to establish credibility," she said, stopping to face him. "The Council will scrutinize every detail of our relationship. We'll need to demonstrate compatibility, mutual respect, and affection." "Affection?" Galen repeated, raising an eyebrow. "You mean I have to pretend to be in love with you?" Kayla's expression remained stoic, but there was a faint hint of color in her cheeks. "If you find that so objectionable, perhaps you should reconsider our arrangement." He held up his hands. "Hey, I'm not backing out. Just trying to figure out how we sell this." Kayla nodded, her composure returning. "We'll start with the basics. Familiarize yourself with Zalaran customs and etiquette. Any misstep could jeopardize our position." "And what about you?" Galen asked. "You're not exactly an expert on human culture either." Her lips twitched into a small smile. "Fair point. Perhaps we can teach each other." They spent the evening exchanging knowledge. Kayla demonstrated the intricate gestures and phrases that conveyed respect among Zalarans, while Galen shared the nuances of human body language and humor. It was an awkward process, filled with misunderstandings and the occasional burst of laughter. But by the time the artificial lights dimmed to simulate night, they had made progress. As Galen settled onto the surprisingly comfortable couch, he glanced over at Kayla, who was meticulously arranging her belongings. For the first time, he noticed how tired she looked, the weight of her responsibilities etched into her features. "Hey," he said softly, "we'll figure this out. Together." She looked at him, her violet eyes unreadable. After a moment, she nodded. "Good night, Galen." "Good night, Kayla," he replied, closing his eyes. In the silence that followed, neither of them could shake the feeling that the challenges ahead were only the beginning. The grand chamber of the council was a masterpiece of alien architecture, a circular expanse where crystalline columns spiraled toward a ceiling that seemed to dissolve into starlight. Each counselor sat in a floating chair that glided smoothly into position, their silver and blue robes glimmering faintly in the ambient light. Kayla stood at the center, calm and poised. Galen shifted uncomfortably beside her, acutely aware of the scrutiny they were under. Counselor Viren rose first, his voice echoing across the chamber. "Lady Kayla, you bring before us a proposal that defies tradition. A Zelaran noble bonded to a human? Explain yourself." Kayla inclined her head, her tone steady. "Counselor, I seek not to defy tradition but to uphold the values of our people, adaptability, strategy, and survival. Galen is not just a human, he is a resourceful individual whose traits complement my own." Viren's gaze swept to Galen, who gave an awkward nod. "And you, human, what do you bring to this union?" Galen cleared his throat, his mind racing. He had spent the entire night practicing, but the pressure of the moment was overwhelming. "I bring perspective," he began, earning a few skeptical murmurs. "Zelarans are brilliant, no doubt, but sometimes brilliance can overlook simple, practical solutions. Humans, well, we're good at finding those." A counselor with iridescent scales leaned forward. "And what practical solutions have you provided thus far?" Galen hesitated. Kayla stepped in smoothly. "His contributions have already been significant. He repaired the energy conduits on my ship during our journey, preventing a catastrophic system failure." This was news to Galen, but he nodded vigorously. "Yeah, that was tricky work." Viren's expression remained impassive. Such acts, while commendable, do not demonstrate compatibility for a union. The council must be assured this is not a mere transaction. Kayla's composure faltered for the first time. She glanced at Galen, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her features. He caught her look and stepped forward, forcing himself to exude confidence. "Look," he said, addressing the counselors directly. "I get it. This seems strange to you. It seems strange to me too. But Kayla and we're figuring it out. I didn't come here to take advantage of your customs or disrespect your traditions. I came because Kayla, she saw something in me when no one else did. And I see something in her." The chamber fell silent. Galen realized he had just veered off script but pressed on anyway. "She's smart, determined, and yeah, a little intimidating. But she's also someone I trust. Someone I want to stand beside, no matter how crazy this all seems." Kayla's expression softened, a hint of genuine surprise in her eyes. The counselors exchanged glances, their faces unreadable. Viren spoke again, his voice quieter but no less firm. "Words are easy, human. Actions speak louder. You will both face the trials of union. If you succeed, the council will recognize your bond." Kayla's eyes widened slightly. "The trials? Counselor, those haven't been invoked in generations. Desperate times call for desperate measures," Viren replied. "You have until tomorrow to prepare." As the council dismissed them, Kayla and Galen returned to their suite in silence. Once the door closed behind them, Kayla let out a frustrated sigh. The trials are a series of challenges designed to test every aspect of a partnership, physical, mental, and emotional. Few have ever passed. Galen flopped onto the couch, rubbing his temples. "Great. So, no pressure." Kayla began pacing. "We need a strategy. Each trial is tailored to expose weaknesses. They'll exploit any division between us." "And what if we don't have any?" Galen asked with a smirk. Kayla stopped, giving him a pointed look. "We've known each other for less than a week. That's a division. He couldn't argue with that. Alright then, how do we get ready? She hesitated, then sat down across from him. We need to establish trust. Complete honesty from this point forward. If we falter, even for a moment, we fail. Galen nodded. Fair enough. I'll start. I'm terrified. I have no idea how I'm supposed to pull this off. To his surprise, Kayla smiled faintly. Honesty suits you, Galen. For what it's worth, I'm terrified too. The admission hung between them, a fragile thread of understanding. For the first time, Galen felt like they might actually have a chance, if they could figure out how to work together. The trials awaited. The trial hall was a cavernous expanse, its walls alive with shifting patterns of light and shadow. Galen and Kayla stood in the center, surrounded by a circular array of glowing glyphs embedded in the floor. Above them, an ethereal voice echoed, a construct of the Council's AI, impartial and unyielding. The trials will commence. 3 challenges. Success in each determines the validity of your union. Begin. The first glyph ignited, projecting a holographic landscape around them. The room dissolved into a dense jungle, the air thick with humidity and the sound of alien wildlife. Kayla immediately crouched, scanning the environment. Galen followed her lead, though less gracefully. What's the objective? He whispered. The AI's voice answered. Trial of collaboration. Retrieve the orb of synergy from the apex predator's nest. Work together or fail. The ground shook as a guttural roar split the air. Galen instinctively reached for a weapon that wasn't there. Apex predator. Sounds delightful. Kayla grabbed his arm. Stay quiet. It's testing our ability to plan, not our brute strength. They moved cautiously through the underbrush, Kayla leading with practiced precision. Galen tried to mirror her movements, though his clumsy steps occasionally snapped a twig or rustled leaves. Kayla shot him a sharp look every time, but she said nothing. As they neared a clearing, the creature came into view. It was a massive, 6-legged beast with iridescent scales that shimmered like molten metal. Its eyes glowed a deep crimson, scanning its surroundings with predatory intensity. In the center of its nest, nestled among shards of bone and fragments of glowing rock, was the orb. Kayla studied the creature. It's reactive to sound. We need to draw it away. And how do we do that without becoming its next meal? She reached into her robe and pulled out a small device. This emits a sonic pulse. It'll think it's prey. Galen nodded. Alright. You distract it. I grabbed the orb. Kayla hesitated. Are you certain? If it turns back too quickly? I'm faster than I look, he said with a grin. Just trust me. Kayla activated the device and tossed it into the jungle. The pulse echoed, a high-pitched hum that made Galen's ears ring. The beast's head snapped toward the sound, and with a thunderous roar, it bounded after the noise. Go! Kayla hissed. Galen sprinted into the nest, his heart pounding. The orb was warm to the touch, its surface swirling with shifting colors. He grabbed it and turned just as the ground trembled again. The creature had realized the ruse and was charging back, its jaws open wide. Kayla shouted something he couldn't hear, and suddenly a burst of light erupted between him and the beast. She had triggered another device, this one projecting a barrier of energy. It wouldn't hold for long. Run, she yelled. He didn't need to be told twice. He bolted toward her, the barrier flickering as the creature slammed into it repeatedly. They barely made it out of the clearing before the barrier shattered, the beast's furious roars echoing behind them. The jungle faded, replaced by the glyphs of the trial hall. The AI's voice returned. Trial of collaboration, passed. Galen collapsed onto the floor, gasping for breath. That was exhilarating. Kayla helped him to his feet, her expression unreadable. 1 trial down. 2 to go. The second glyph flared, bathing them in cold blue light. This time, they stood in a void, surrounded by a grid of floating cubes that shifted and rotated unpredictably. Trial of understanding, the AI announced. Align the matrix. Success requires synchronization. Galen frowned. Align the what now? Kayla studied the cubes, her mind racing. Each move affects the others. It's a puzzle. We need to work together to solve it. He stepped closer, examining the grid. All right, tell me what to do. She hesitated. This requires precision. Kayla, he interrupted. Trust me. She nodded reluctantly and began directing him, her instructions concise and deliberate. Galen followed her lead, moving the cubes carefully while she adjusted others. Slowly, the chaotic grid began to take shape, forming a symmetrical pattern. Just as they neared completion, the grid shifted again, faster this time. Galen cursed under his breath. It's changing the rules. Kayla remained calm. Adapt. Look for the pattern. They worked frantically, their movements becoming more fluid as they fell into a rhythm. With a final adjustment, the grid locked into place, glowing with a brilliant white light. Trial of understanding, passed. Galen wiped the sweat from his brow. This AI has a sadistic streak. Kayla allowed herself a small smile. One more. The final glyph activated, and the hall darkened. A single platform materialized beneath them, suspended in an endless void. The AI's voice resonated with a chilling finality. Trial of trust. One must fall. The other must catch. Galen and Kayla exchanged uneasy glances. The meaning was clear. Kayla stepped toward the edge, her expression resolute. I'll go. Wait, Galen said, stepping in front of her. I'll do it. You don't even know how this works, she argued. Exactly. So if something goes wrong, better me than you. Kayla hesitated, her eyes searching his face. Finally, she nodded. Galen stepped backward off the edge without hesitation, the void swallowing him whole. For a moment, there was only silence. Then the platform tilted, threatening to throw Kayla off balance. She grabbed a lever that had appeared at the edge, her mind racing. The mechanisms were alien, shifting unpredictably, but she focused, guiding the platform to stabilize. Galen, hold on, she murmured, though she knew he couldn't hear her. A glowing tether appeared, snaking into the void. She grabbed it, pulling with all her strength. The platform tilted further, but she didn't let go. With one final heave, Galen emerged, gasping for air. Kayla pulled him onto the platform as the glyphs reappeared around them. The AI's voice echoed one last time. Trial of trust, passed. The union is valid. They sat there for a moment, breathing heavily. Kayla finally broke the silence. You didn't hesitate? Neither did you, Galen replied, grinning despite himself. She shook her head, a flicker of something unspoken passing between them. The council had their proof, but the trials had proven something else, something neither of them was ready to admit. The council chamber was eerily silent as Kayla and Galen stood before the assembled members once more. The glyphs of the trial hall had vanished, but the tension in the room had not. Viren's gaze bore into them, searching for any trace of weakness. Lady Kayla, he said, his voice cold and measured, you and your partner have succeeded where many would have failed. Yet, success alone does not guarantee our approval. Galen rolled his eyes, earning a sharp elbow from Kayla. What now? He muttered under his breath. Kayla bowed slightly. Counselor, we have met the trials with resilience and unity. What further proof do you require? Viren leaned forward. Proof that this union is not merely one of convenience. You claim compatibility. Show us the foundation upon which it rests. Kayla hesitated for the first time, her usual composure cracking slightly. Galen, sensing the weight of the moment, stepped forward. Look, I know you're skeptical, he began, addressing the council directly. I get it. From your perspective, I'm just some random human Kayla picked to solve her problems. But the truth is, this partnership isn't just about her. It's about both of us. The murmurs among the council grew louder, but Viren raised a hand, silencing them. Continue. Galen turned to Kayla, who met his gaze with a mixture of surprise and curiosity. Kayla saw potential in me when I didn't even see it in myself. She believed in me, trusted me to face those trials, even when I doubted I could. That's not convenience. That's something deeper. Kayla's expression softened, and for a moment, she looked almost vulnerable. She stepped beside him, addressing the council with renewed determination. Humans and Zelarans may differ in many ways, but we share one crucial trait, the ability to adapt. Galen and I have proven that together, we are greater than the sum of our parts. Viren regarded them for a long moment before rising to his feet. The council will deliberate. The chamber emptied, leaving Kayla and Galen alone. The tension was palpable as they waited in silence. Finally, Galen broke it. Think we convinced them? Kayla shook her head, her usual confidence replaced with uncertainty. I don't know. The doors opened, and the council returned. Viren's expression was unreadable as he took his seat. The council has reached a decision. Kayla straightened, her hands clenched at her sides. Galen felt his heart pounding in his chest. Your union is approved. Relief washed over Kayla's face, though she quickly masked it with her usual composure. Galen, on the other hand, let out a loud, yes, before catching her warning glance. Viren raised a hand, silencing the murmurs of the other counselors. This approval is conditional. Your bond will be monitored to ensure its integrity. Any sign of deception, and the council's ruling will be revoked. Kayla nodded. Understood, counselor. As they left the chamber, Galen exhaled deeply. Conditional approval? They really don't trust us, do they? They are cautious by nature, Kayla replied. But we've bought ourselves time, and that is enough for now. Galen glanced at her, noting the weariness in her posture. What happens next? She stopped, turning to face him. Now we solidify our position. My inheritance must be secured, and for that, we need to navigate the political landscape carefully. The council's approval is only the first step. More politics? Galen groaned. I was hoping for something less, mind-numbing. Kayla smiled faintly. Welcome to the Zelaran aristocracy. As they returned to their quarters, Galen couldn't help but notice the shift in Kayla's demeanor. She was still composed and calculating, but there was a softness to her now, a hint of trust that hadn't been there before. Kayla, he said as they entered their suite, you really believe we can pull this off? She paused, her violet eyes meeting his. I believe we have no choice but to try. For the first time, Galen felt the weight of what they were undertaking, not just for Kayla, but for himself as well. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about proving that, against all odds, they could succeed together. Kayla stood before the massive console in their quarters, its surface shimmering with layers of translucent holograms displaying her family's assets, alliances, and debts. The holograms shifted as her fingers danced through them, each motion precise, calculated. Galen leaned against the wall, watching her with growing admiration and unease. Your family's estate looks complicated, he ventured, breaking the silence. Complicated is an understatement, Kayla replied without looking up. When my parents died, they left a legacy in ruins. Unpaid debts, fractured alliances, and dwindling influence. Securing my inheritance isn't just about power, it's about survival. Galen frowned, stepping closer. And the council? They just let this happen? She sighed. The council values strength. They see my family's collapse as weakness. Without the inheritance, I'll lose what little leverage I have left. That's why they agreed to the trials. They wanted me to fail. Galen folded his arms. But you didn't. We didn't. So now what? Kayla turned to him, her expression hardening. Now we play their game. A soft chime interrupted them, and Kayla waved a hand, dismissing the holograms. A voice echoed through the room, formal and sharp. Lady Kayla, the emissary of House Threx awaits in the central hall. Kayla's jaw tightened. House Threx is one of our largest creditors. This meeting was inevitable. And they're here now? Galen asked. She nodded. It seems they want to test my resolve. As they descended to the central hall, Galen couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a casual visit. The emissary was waiting, flanked by 2 guards in gleaming obsidian armor. He was tall and wiry, his pale skin almost translucent, with sharp features that gave him an air of predatory cunning. Lady Kayla, he said smoothly, his voice laced with mock politeness. It has been far too long. Kayla inclined her head. Emissary Lyran. To what do I owe the pleasure? Lyran's thin lips curled into a smile. I come on behalf of my house to discuss your recent developments. This human partner of yours has caused quite a stir. Kayla's gaze remained steady. Our union was sanctioned by the council. Surely House Threx respects their ruling. Of course, Lyron said, his tone dripping with insincerity. But rulings can change. The council's approval is tenuous at best. We both know they're waiting for you to falter. Kayla's expression didn't waver. If you have something to say, Lyron, say it. Lyron's smile faded. Your family owes House Threx a significant sum, one that has remained unpaid for far too long. Your inheritance alone will not cover the debt. Galen stepped forward before he could stop himself. So what's your angle, Lyron? You're not here just to chat about unpaid bills. Lyron's eyes flicked to him, a glimmer of disdain crossing his face. Ah, the human speaks. How quaint. Kayla raised a hand, silencing Galen before he could retort. What do you want, Lyron? Lyron's smile returned, colder this time. A simple arrangement. House Threx will erase your debt in exchange for a favor. A minor political concession, really? Kayla's eyes narrowed. Which is? The transfer of the Lyrian crystals, Lyron said, his tone casual, as if he were asking for a cup of tea. Galen frowned. What are Lyrian crystals? Kayla's voice was ice. A rare energy source. Essential to maintaining the stability of my estate's power grid. Lyron shrugged. A small price to pay for freedom from debt? Kayla stepped closer, her tone deadly. Without those crystals, my estate will collapse entirely. You know this? Precisely, Lyron said, unbothered by her anger. Your position is precarious, Lady Kayla. I suggest you consider my offer carefully. Kayla didn't respond, her gaze locked with Lyron's. The room was thick with tension, the guards shifting uncomfortably. Finally, Lyron inclined his head. Take your time, of course. But not too much. House Threx grows impatient. As Lyron and his guards departed, Galen turned to Kayla, his voice low. That guy's a real piece of work. Kayla nodded, her expression grim. House Threx has been circling like vultures since my parents' deaths. They see this as their chance to devour what's left. So what do we do? Galen asked. Kayla's jaw tightened. We find another way. I won't let Lyron dictate my future. Galen hesitated before placing a hand on her shoulder. You're not in this alone anymore. We'll figure it out. Kayla glanced at him, a flicker of gratitude breaking through her stern exterior. Thank you, Galen. But this is only the beginning. As they returned to their quarters, Kayla reopened the holograms, her mind racing. Galen watched her, the weight of their predicament settling over him. They had won the council's approval, but the battle for Kayla's inheritance and her family's legacy was far from over. Kayla's estate shimmered in the distance, its crystalline towers piercing the sky like frozen beams of light. From the observation deck of their transport, Galen studied the vast, sprawling grounds below. For all its beauty, he could feel the tension radiating from Kayla beside him. Lyron's going to make his move soon, isn't he? Galen asked. Kayla nodded, her voice steady but strained. House Threx won't wait long. If we don't secure the Lyrian crystals and stabilize the estate's energy grid, everything will collapse. Lyron will swoop in to claim what's left. And your people? The workers, the families depending on you? Galen's tone carried an edge. They'll be displaced. Forced into servitude under House Threx, Kayla said, her jaw tightening. I can't let that happen. Galen leaned back, staring out the window. Then we need a plan. Something Lyron won't see coming. Kayla turned to him, her violet eyes sharp. I already have one. The transport landed smoothly in the courtyard, where a small group of Kayla's closest allies awaited. They greeted her with formal bows, their expressions a mixture of hope and anxiety. Kayla wasted no time, addressing them with calm authority. Begin transferring the reserve Lyrian crystals to the grid immediately. Prioritize critical systems. Divert resources from the secondary towers if necessary. One of her advisors, a broad-shouldered Zelaran named Zeril, frowned. Lady Kayla, the reserves are already dangerously low. If we deplete them further, we won't, Kayla interrupted. Galen and I are taking a team to the southern ridge. The original Lyrian mines are still there, untouched for years. Zero's eyes widened. The mines are unstable. There's a reason they were abandoned. We don't have a choice, Kayla said firmly. If we don't secure more crystals, the estate will fall. Zero hesitated, then nodded. I'll assemble a team. As the group dispersed, Galen stepped closer to Kayla. You didn't mention anything about unstable mines. Would it have changed your decision? She asked, arching an eyebrow. Not really. But I like to know when I'm about to do something incredibly stupid. Kayla allowed herself a faint smile. Then consider this fair warning. The journey to the southern ridge was treacherous. The terrain grew rougher with every mile, jagged rocks and sheer cliffs making the transport vehicles useless. They continued on foot, the air thick with the hum of distant machinery and the faint glow of residual energy from the abandoned mines. When they reached the entrance, Kayla hesitated. The mine was dark and foreboding, its gaping maw emitting faint, eerie pulses of light. Galen adjusted his equipment, glancing at her. You sure about this? Kayla met his gaze, her voice steady. No. But we don't have a choice. Inside, the mine was a labyrinth of twisting tunnels, the walls shimmering faintly with residual Lyrian energy. Their team moved cautiously, scanning for signs of instability. The deeper they went, the louder the hum of energy grew, until they reached a vast chamber where clusters of Lyrian crystals jutted from the walls like jagged teeth. We found them, Kayla breathed. Zero began organizing the extraction team, his voice steady despite the tension. As the workers carefully began harvesting the crystals, Galen noticed a faint vibration in the ground. Kayla? Is the floor supposed to do that? Her expression darkened. The instability. It's worse than I thought. Before she could say more, a deafening rumble echoed through the chamber. The walls shook, sending chunks of rock cascading down. One of the workers shouted, and Galen instinctively grabbed Kayla, pulling her back as a massive crystal shard crashed where she had just been standing. We've got to get out of here, Galen yelled. Kayla shook her head. Not without the crystals. Galen cursed under his breath but nodded, turning to Zero. Double the pace. Move. The team worked frantically, extracting as many crystals as they could carry while Galen and Kayla coordinated their escape route. The vibrations grew stronger, cracks spiderwebbing through the walls and ceiling. We've got enough. Zero shouted. Kayla gave a sharp nod. Go. Now. The team sprinted through the tunnels, the mine collapsing around them. Galen stayed close to Kayla, his heart pounding as debris rained down. They reached the surface just as the entrance caved in behind them, sending a cloud of dust and energy particles into the air. Galen doubled over, gasping for breath. That was too close. Kayla straightened, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and determination. We did it. Back at the estate, the crystals were quickly integrated into the grid. The towers shimmered brighter, their energy stabilizing as the system roared back to life. Kayla stood on the observation deck, watching as her estate glowed with renewed vitality. You pulled it off, Galen said, stepping beside her. We pulled it off, she corrected. Her gaze softened. Thank you, Galen. I couldn't have done this without you. He smirked. You're welcome. But I'm still charging hazard pay. Kayla actually laughed, a rare and genuine sound. I'll add it to your growing tab. As the estate stabilized, word of Kayla's success spread. The council, forced to acknowledge her resilience, issued a formal decree solidifying her inheritance. House Threx, faced with a revitalized rival, withdrew their demands. Standing together on the observation deck, Kayla and Galen watched the sunrise over the shimmering towers. For the first time in years, the future looked brighter, not just for Kayla's estate, but for the strange partnership that had defied all odds.